Rakhmonov versus Ian Garry. It was supposed to be Rakhmonov versus Bilal for the title. Ian Garry steps in to try to steal Shavkat's title shot. I believe this fight's going to be 5 rounds. Very surprised at the odds. I saw the move a little bit. I feel like Ian Garry wasn't this big of an underdog. I feel like he was in the low 2s. Now I see plus 300. I see plus 275, plus 290, plus 310. And then you got Shavkat's minus 400, minus 395. So they made Ian Garry a pretty big underdog for this fight. And I feel like Ian Garry's a live dog as well. I know I keep saying that in this video, but undefeated. I feel like Shavkat's going to win. I'm leaning toward Shavkat. I think Shavkat actually knocks him out. But I could see a realm where Ian Garry point fights and stick and moves and dances around for 5 rounds and beat Shavkat on the scorecards. I think that Shavkat should take the fight to the ground instead of giving Garry a chance, but then even there, we haven't seen Gary's game really tested, but then if he was tested in the gym, and that's where Shavkat got him last time, he now trains with Damian Maia on the regular, what's his name, Charles Oliveira on the regular, so he's definitely got really good jiu-jitsu guys that he's going with that I'm sure even one session, let alone months, changes your game, especially MMA grappling and high-level jiu-jitsu guys he's working with. But I did see that one video that they were putting out of them sparring light, and then I did see another video of Shavkat sparring with, what's his name, Li Jingliang, and he was beating the shit out of Li Jingliang. That if he was going that hard in the video with Ian Garry, I wonder how that round goes. Because we know Gary's very rangy, keeps his distance, doesn't get into slug fights where it looks like Rakhmonov likes to bite down on his mouthpiece and start swinging. And now, I didn't hear any media address this. I heard Shavkat come out and say that I submitted him in training. And I wonder if he was saying I submitted you to hide what really happened, or if it even really happened, because I know there was I'm surprised no media asked about it, but I know there was a story with Brendan Allen saying that there's video out there of Ian Garry getting put to sleep, knocked out in training, and then I think it was insinuated that it was Shavkat, but I did not see that question asked. I have not heard anything else about it. I don't believe it's really been debunked. I think Brendan Allen said it, and then I think a couple of MMA journalists that I've seen made videos about it, and it got a little bit of legs, and it was never denied by anybody. And I do know that they, on sparring day, go very hard. Like that video that was put out about Shavkat and Ian Garry, that was light drilling. That was not sparring. They spar at Killcliff. They sparred at Sanford when they were the Black Zillions. They spar. People get knocked out in practice all the time. So that wasn't news, hearing that Ian Garry potentially got knocked out in practice. Came from Brendan Allen, who's been with the team for a while, was in the gym every day, I'm sure. Nobody asked that question. Nobody asked him who knocked him out. Nobody asked him, was it Shavkat? Nobody asked Shavkat, did you see him get knocked out? Anything along those lines. So that was a curious piece of information that we still haven't gotten an answer to. And I guess we're going to get it in the fight, but obviously going to lean toward Shavkat. Again, there's not a lot of value in betting a minus 400 pick, so you might want to look into round props or ways the fight finishes. I could see, again, it's tough because you never seen Ian Garry stopped. You never seen Ian Garry knocked out. You've seen him dropped. You've seen him hurt a little bit, I guess, but you never seen him stopped. And obviously Shavkat is going to be that next step up in competition. They're both going to be, this is going to be a step up for both of them, if you will. Again, they both have a couple common opponents, main one being Jeff Neal, where they're kind of comparing their performances, where Ian Garry is saying he didn't get touched, Shavkat saying I stopped him. I feel like same thing with Luque. Luque got a good Ian Garry, or a good Jeff Neal. We've seen other fights where Jeff Neal looks like a world beater. Then we see some other fights where he's a little bit slower in his reactions and just not there, missed weight. Pretty sure he missed weight. But I just feel like, and I don't remember him saying it, Jeff Neal had some stuff going on that maybe some of those nights we didn't get the best Jeff Neal. So not going to hold too much into those performances because A beat B and just styles always make fights. Like it never really translates into how a fight's going to go. These two probably know who's going to win this fight. And I see Ian Garry looking very confident, but almost like he's trying to convince himself like the rounds didn't go his way. So going to pick Shavkat, going to lean towards Shavkat. Again, recurring theme in this video, look at all these fights. Wouldn't be surprised if Ian Garry pulls off a 50-45 and just jabs him for 5 rounds. Hope that doesn't happen because I like Shavkat. Not that I dislike Gary, but more of a Shavkat fan, not the biggest Gary fan. I like what he does with this kid. I'm a fan of his kid. But he made it easy for the MMA community to not ride with him. But then he's obviously going to get a little bit of the Conor support because he's from Ireland and he's the next wave of Irish fighter. So he definitely has some fans, but got to ride with Shavkat on this one. Don't see how, or I do see how Ian Garry gets done, but I don't see how Shavkat doesn't channel that Uzbekistan or whatever he is. What is he? Whatever Triple G is. Kazakhstan. That Kazakhstanian or whatever you call it, that Russian in him that just makes him go to war, makes him press the fight, and makes him go to where he knows he can win the fight, which is, if he's had success on the ground, take the fight to the ground. But definitely going Shavkat. Should have been the main event as well. I feel like the 125er shouldn't have been the main event, but then I guess co-main event, main event, kind of the same thing. But then brings us to the main event, Pantoja, Kai Asakura. So one thing that's always said is it's easier to become champion than it is to stay champion. And that's because when you're becoming champion, you're fighting all these guys, you're working your way up the ranks. You might skip some guys that are difficult fights, and you might not get everybody's best every night. When you're the champion, you're getting everyone's championship performance, like they're zoned in. Either they choke or you get that night where he's Buster Douglas and he's willing to die in there and he has this chip on his shoulder that he's not going anywhere. And I feel like that's what we see more often than not in a guy's title shot. So that's what we're going to get here with Kai Asakura. He is a champion in other organizations, but like I was saying in the beginning of the video, has not made 125 in 7 years. Never made 125. He weighed in at the lowest he's ever weighed, which was 124.5. So how is he going to rehydrate? How tough was the weight cut? All these questions are big, glaring questions to me, at least. Does he have 5-round cardio after cutting down to 125? We know Pantoja's got 5-round cardio. We know he's got power. We know he's got submissions. He's got grappling. He's definitely one of the most well-rounded, if not the most well-rounded champions that we have in the UFC. And I know 125 is always highly skilled, but you see a guy like Pantoja cleaned out the division pretty much, so they're bringing this guy in now. No fights in the UFC, champion from outside the UFC, never made 125. They're reaching. I remember when it was DJ, they made that season The Ultimate Fighter just to find him opponents because he had already cleaned out the division. So we're seeing dominant champions at 125 sometimes run out of people to fight. And I know they just got rid of Mokaev. There's one other guy, I forget the guy, but there's one other guy at 125 that could potentially be a title fight contender coming up for Pantoja, but I think he's 12 or I think he's 4-0 in the UFC, so they didn't give the fight to him. And then you wonder if Pantoja beats Kai, what's next? I'm leaning towards Pantoja. He is the favorite money-wise, minus 244. Kai is 209, 200. So I'm leaning Pantoja. I think Pantoja's the better fighter. I think he probably had a good training camp with Cody Durden. It's always good when you have a teammate on the card with you, so you're getting ready, you're grinding together, you're peaking at the same time, you have someone to do cardio with and really like zone in on the date with. And it also probably helps the team out as well, that you kind of have training dialed in because you have two guys fighting on the same card in big fights. But what's next for the winner after this is something that I'm curious about, because I don't think Horiguchi is going to fight, or I would love to see them bring over Horiguchi. I don't think Horiguchi would fight Pantoja because they're teammates at American Top Team. I don't know how that one would go, but then we've seen top teammates fight before. I don't know how good of friends they are, but if Kai wins, they could bring a guy like Horiguchi in and run that third fight between the two because they've exchanged wins with each other. Or Kai starts getting new opponents. They do the rematch with Pantoja, but I feel like they're running into this problem now at 125 if they're bringing in a guy like Kai Asakura, who's never even fought in the UFC, never even made 125, and he's an automatic title shot. So they're definitely running out of contenders for Pantoja at this point. But where was I looking for? Let me try to find this one. Who was that other guy? Asu Amabayev is 21-12, 4-0 in the UFC. And then there's Tigar Mokaev, who I don't know if they're bringing him back or if he's out of the UFC, or Mokaev actually has a fight. Is that in the UFC or is that in... Let me see. Yeah, so he's fighting in Brave CF 91. So he's out of the UFC. Officially not bringing him back. I know that there was some talk about him possibly getting another shot. So, I mean, what are you guys doing with 125? If you guys are bringing in, how many more Japanese contenders do you guys have out there for Pantoja if he wins this fight? I don't know. I think he beats Kai. I think we've seen Kai beat before. We've seen Pantoja beat before, but never been knocked out. Never been stopped. Beaten some really good guys. Faced some guys similar to Kai before, and he's handled them. So I think he's going to handle them again and still. But the big question is what's next. Like I said, I think they could bring in Haraguchi for Kai. But again, that'd be another guy coming in. But I think he was like 7-1 in the UFC, Haraguchi, and a champion outside the UFC. So if they're just trying to get the best flyweights in the world, but then again, I don't think Pantoja and Haraguchi are going to be quick to fight each other. Maybe if it's for the UFC belt, but they definitely have some stuff going on at 125. If Pantoja wins and continues to clear out the division, they got nobody else. He's going to start doing a lap the third time around in the division. So going Pantoja. The odds are close enough that you might be able to sprinkle Pantoja in a parlay, or not so much a straight up bet. But so again, run it through. Going Kennedy, Njokuusha, however you pronounce that. Chase Hooper. We're going to take Chiesa. We're going to take Cody Durden. Weidman and Anders is a tough pick. We're going to pick with our heart. We're going to go with Weidman. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it's Eric Anders going to stay away from that fight betting-wise. There is one New York parlay where you could go Weidman, Randy Brown, Aljamain, but I think the odds were pretty good, maybe like plus 1,500. Going to go Randy Brown over Brian Battle. Going to be a tough fight. Wouldn't be surprised there. Brian Battle is the favorite. He did miss weight, but Randy Brown's pretty good. Aljamain, we're going to go with Aljamain over Mosvar. Again, another one of those fights. Wouldn't be surprised if Evil takes it, but Aljamain's really good. Former champion. Luque, another slight underdog. We're going to pick him over Garimbo. Garimbo was a slight favorite in that fight. Then we got Dominic Reyes. I think he TKOs or finishes Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith is fighting with that chip on his shoulder, that Buster Douglas. He just lost someone close to him, though, so he's going to be a tough out. Nate Landwehr versus Dong Ho Choi. Going to go with Nate Landwehr. That fight's kind of a pick'em. Slight underdog for Dong Ho Choi. Kron Gracie versus Bryce Mitchell. Going to go Bryce Mitchell. If there is a submission in that fight, it's going to be Kron Gracie catching Bryce Mitchell. He definitely is the better grappler, better jiu-jitsu, but Bryce Mitchell is no slouch there. Bryce Mitchell's a huge favorite, minus 950, so I don't know if you're sprinkling that in anything. Maybe you're picking Kron, but then the last couple of fights, Kron has not looked good. Gon versus Volkov. We're going Gon. Don't be mad at yourself if you pick Volkov and he loses, but then again, he's live in that fight, so he lost the first fight, but I think Volkov's looked really good lately. Ian Garry versus Shavkat. We're going Shavkat. I think a lot happened in those training sessions. I do see, maybe he's just super confident, but I do see Garry trying to convince himself that he can beat Shavkat. And Shavkat undefeated, Garry undefeated. Shavkat's finished everybody. I think he finishes Garry in this fight. And then Kai Asakura versus Pantoja. We're going to go Pantoja. I think he outclasses Kai. I think Kai's going to have UFC jitters. I think Kai's going to have a tough weight cut. I think first fight, I think it might be his first fight in America. First fight in the UFC. He's got a very tall order against him fighting Pantoja, who's one of the best flyweights we've seen. So UFC 310. Let me know some of your picks, some of your bets. I definitely, a lot of these fights too, if you're not picking underdogs, definitely look at some round props. I could see Chase and Clay Guida, definitely a finish in that fight. I think Chase Hooper finishes him. It's just how does he finish him? I could see Cody Durden versus Josh Van. Look into the round props of that, going over 1.5, over 2.5. I think Cody Durden takes a decision in that one. I think Weidman and Anders, you look at that fight, I think that fight's going over a round and a half. I think Brian Battle versus Randy Brown goes over a round and a half. I think everyone is trying to see what the odds are on Evil versus Sterling going to a decision. Luque versus Garimbo, I could see that fight going over a round and a half as well. Both guys are durable. Anthony Smith versus Reyes. I was thinking that fight was over a round and a half until I heard that Anthony Smith was coming in with a chip on his shoulder and dealing with a loss. So that's the question mark in that fight, is how is Anthony Smith going to fight? And then also, is Reyes back? You know, he caught, who was that? Dustin Jacoby, but Dustin Jacoby was charging at him and he caught him with a left hand after Dustin Jacoby hit him with a punch. So he looked good in the fight, but he looked good right after he was in a little bit of trouble. So we'll see how that one plays out. Landwehr, Doo Ho Choi. Definitely think that fight ends with inside the distance. Bryce Mitchell, Kron Gracie. I don't know what type of odds they're going to have for that fight going over. I think they're going to think that fight goes to a decision, that both guys' jiu-jitsu is going to cancel each other out. Gane versus Volkov. This is only a 3-round fight. Last time they fought 5 rounds. I don't think there's a finish in that fight, but it's heavyweight, so I could see that fight going to a decision. Shavkat versus Ian Garry. Looking to Garry by decision. I don't know if Garry finishes Rakhmonov. It is a 5-round fight. Shavkat, how does he finish it is the question. He's never been to a decision in his career. He's finished everybody. And then Pantoja versus Kai, I definitely like over a round and a half. I don't know about 2.5, but it should go over 2.5. But again, I'm really watching Kai's weight cut in this fight and what his cardio is going to look like. Cutting down so low for the first time. He definitely looked bigger than Pantoja, but it's going to come down to cardio. How good's your cardio? Your first time cutting down to 125, and then 7 years ago was the last time he made anywhere even remotely near that weight, or 8 or 6 years ago he made 130. So it's tough to cut weight. It really zaps your cardio, so we'll see how these fights go. Let me know some of your picks in the comments. Let me know if you think I'm an idiot for my picks. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video celebrating some wins. Well, see you later.